the writers even like Night Elves? No, they don't.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really
Seriously though, since Cataclysm, it's felt like the writers have a personal vendetta to settle with Night Elves as a concept. I'm convinced that one of them got dunked on so hard by a Night Elf player in Warcraft 3 Versus that they never got over it and now it's our fucking problem. If you don't want spoilers for Dragonflight alpha material, then avert thine good Christian eyes, because it's what sparked this. Blizzard, who hurt you? Whomst amongst you was hurt by a Night Elf player? You've spent the last several years kicking Night Elf players in the teeth as if one of them broke up your marriage. Starting with Cataclysm, they lose a sizable chunk of Ashenvale to the Horde, suffering attacks as far west as Maestra's Post with full-on bombing runs by Wyvern on Astronar. Meanwhile, Dryads in Ashenvale are treated like a joke as they fight fully armoured orcs with their bare hands and you have to retrieve their silly little fragile bodies. Never mind the fact that they were considered totally valid and viable forces during the War of the Ancients. You know, when the Night Elf Rebellion fought against the Burning Legion, literal demons. Have you played Heroes of the Storm? It's the pageant baby Blizzard put way too much pressure on and shot in the back of the head when it cracked. But one of the heroes they added was a Dryad called Lunara, and she is vicious. She is the pure, distilled embodiment of the meme Mother Nature wants you whacked. Poison Ivy would be proud. She would kill you with a poison spear and toxic spores and use your body for mulch. That is what Dryads are, not this ooh-woo silly baby flower child nonsense that makes them next to useless in a fight. My Loon should be an outlier, not the standard. The orcs were afraid of Night Elves when they first entered Ashenvale. Grom Hellscream himself breathlessly described the then entirely female Sentinel army as perfect warriors and far more savage than any elf he's ever encountered. So what does that tell you? The Night Elves are brutal combatants who should not be taken lightly. And yet. Ajara is also lost to the goblins for them to put trike tracks everywhere and an ugly statue of Gallywix on a hill he turned into his pleasure palace. And this fucking thing that annoys me to this day, are you fucking kidding me with this? Winterspring could have been a Night Elf zone, but it's really more of a neutral area where another goblin settlement for wacky hijinks ensues instead of giving us some cool winter elf vibes. Yes, I know there's still elf content in this zone, but the area is still considered contested and it doesn't actually belong to them, so shush. Meanwhile, Stone Talon is another war zone where a druid school was bombed into a crater and the only real repercussion for that in the story was the guy who gave the order was thrown to his death by Garrosh. Boy, this would have been a neat thread to follow. It's almost like Garrosh could have been an actually honourable war chief instead of turning into a power-hungry orc supremacist who performs the very action he killed a man for, only even fucking worse because we went from a regular bomb to a magic nuke. It's fine, don't worry about it! Meanwhile, important elf characters get shoved off to the side into obscurity until they need a villain for some throwaway plot because no one can ever just have a grievance in this game without becoming a villain who needs to be stopped. Biggest example for Night Elves would be Maiev Shadowsong, who was the Night Elf POV in that section of the Frozen Throne campaign, most famous for being Illidan's jailer for his 10,000-year time out before Tyrande came along and murdered half her forces to bust him out, and then he casually massacred a port town. Oops. When we next find Maiev in the Burning Crusade, she's been captured off-screen by Illidan and is sprung from her cage just to fight Illidan at the end of the Black Temple raid. This should be a moment of closure for her, only the writers decide to go, actually, no, this highly dedicated woman who sacrificed her entire life to keep monsters locked away from the population is nothing at all without this one particular monster. And then she vanishes for an expansion before she's brought back in a terrible novel, made out as a crazed serial killer, and her briefly resurrected order is killed off again, causing her to flee until Legion, when the writers realize what a shitshow that novel was and politely pretend that it didn't happen. And for some reason, they seem to like doing this to Wardens in particular. Cordana Felsong was relevant throughout Warlords of Draenor as a supporting character who kept Khadgar from getting himself killed because he's a magic himbo with too much curiosity. Whoops, she's spell-corrupted now and we've got a killer in the Vault of the Wardens, how spooky. Never mind that this vault exists in the first place, which runs counter to what was presented before, i.e. the Barrow Prison being the only one of its kind that the Wardens had dominion over, but a lot of things were retconned in order to make the Broken Isles work as a new place to go to for the Legion expansion, so let's just pretend it was always here, I guess. Point is, the Wardens lose control of it, have to spring the Demon Hunters for help, and then spend the rest of their time getting adventurers to help them, as if they aren't highly skilled bounty hunters and jailers with thousands of years of experience. Syrah Moonwarden is another example of one-note corruption ripping away what could have been a developing character going forward, because the entire mess that is undead night elves fighting to further desecrate their own home out of some bizarre rage that alone didn't save them, so they'll fight alongside their own murderers. What? Okay, reeling it back a bit. Mists of fucking Pandaria. Specifically the patch involving the scenario A Little Patience, and everything to do with the Divine Bell being held in Darnassus. A Little Patience being the scenario where Tyrande has to learn to be patient on the battlefield, and has to learn this lesson from Varian Wrynn of all people. Tyrande Whisperwind, a pre-sundering night elf who is over 10,000 years old, who served as her people's spiritual and military leader since the original continent of Kalimdor shattered, who has seen combat more times than Varian ever will, even if he hadn't died, who successfully defended her homelands for 10 millennia and wasn't overcome until the very powers that destroyed the empire she was born in so long ago finally came back to Azeroth. She needed to learn patience from some 40-year-old human who only just barely learned patience the blink of an eye ago. Are you kidding me? Meanwhile, almost everything that goes wrong with the Divine Bell falling into Horde hands is down to the Night Elves just not being good enough. Darnassus, which you'd think would be covered in security measures like sentinel owls, hidden shapeshifted druids, treants and ancients standing still as trees like watchtowers, wisps, but nah, it's infiltrated just easily enough. It's fine. It wasn't a problem. Hell, the story team wanted to obliterate Darnassus all the way back here, in Mists. They initially planned to have Garrosh destroy it using the Divine Bell to unleash the Shah, only for fan backlash to stay their hand. Because, yes, the Horde gets villain-batted on the regular, and that feels bad. I play Horde as much as I play Alliance. I have 2 mains, one for each. But you know who gets the shorter end of the stick in that situation? The Alliance. Because when the Horde gets villain-batted, they have to have a target to be a villain on, and that is the Alliance. A city is nuked, a country is lost, entire swaths of territory are bombed, butchered, deforested, or burned. And speaking of burning, there's the obvious thing, the big thing, one of the messiest and most poorly handled story beats in World of Warcraft, and the thing that we are all so fucking tired of having discourse about. The fucking tree. It still would have sucked if Garrosh did it, but at least Garrosh would have done things previously that would make it make some kind of vague shitty sense, like Theramore, but instead they mangle Sylvanas, a genocide survivor, into performing a genocide on the Night Elves, and the rest of the Horde just follows her orders with nary a protest save for Saurfang limply complaining after the fact.
Bad writing.
And leading up to this mass slaughter already involved killing so many Night Elves that there were wisps streaming through Ashenvale in numbers high enough for Malfurion to create a massive barrier into Darkshore out of them. He blocked access to an entire region because the number of dead elves was high enough to do so. And then they got killed even harder. So they essentially lost Ashenvale, Felwood isn't remotely reclaimed enough to be considered real territory, Winterspring isn't a home for them, Ajara isn't a home for them, Darkshore is supposedly reclaimed, but for what? It's a shattered landscape of natural disasters and scattered ruins, and Teldrassil is permanently gone. This leaves the Night Elves with Hyjal as their only remaining maybe viable home in the shadow of Nordrassil, which I'm not holding my breath on because I do not trust the writers to not find a new way to kick them while they're down, and oh would you look at that! I mean, this almost makes sense considering Night Elves are the closest on the ancestry tree to trolls, and we've seen how Blizzard treats the trolls, haven't we? Does the Alliance help them fight back to take their broken home? Fuck no. They have Anduin essentially say, "That's rough, buddy," causing Tyrande to storm off as if she's being unreasonable for expecting help, and Gen splits off to go help her out of obligation. Tyrande becoming the Night Warrior was cool and all, but then they proceed to screw that up as well in Shadowlands, the expansion absolutely no one asked for, by framing the Night Warrior's power as something corruptive and dangerous that she has to be cleansed of, actually. And Malfurion is just nowhere to be seen while Tyrande jumps into Super Hell. Cool. Tyrande is essentially forced into not killing Sylvanas by the very goddess who gave her this power, and has to let go, choosing renewal over revenge, which entails all those slaughtered Night Elf souls. You know, the one Elune herself implies that she let die on purpose to send to Ardenweald as soul fuel. Love that for them. Volunteering themselves to be permanently obliterated Archimonde style so Tyrande can get a special seed fueled by their anima. You could just leave Ysera in Ardenweald. You could just write her daughter growing into the position, developing her own power, and becoming the new leader of the Green Dragonflight. Killing off Malfurion because you don't know what to do with him is lazy, boneheaded, exhausting, and irritating. Also, do you really want to open up the can of worms that is, we can resurrect people from the Shadowlands with equivalent exchange? Because Blizzard, there's a few characters you've killed off that people did not like you killing off, and people are going to ask, so who can we exchange to bring that one back? You don't want to open that can. Not that putting something in writing has stopped you from ignoring it to justify the next story beat. I fucking hate it here. Hello everyone, this was quite unplanned as you might be able to tell, but I've been playing a Night Elf as my main since the tail end of the Burning Crusade, and they were my favourite faction to play as in Warcraft 3, closely followed by the Undead. You can probably tell that I did not at all enjoy anything about BFA's opening act from either side. Hopefully they don't go through with this because I'm very tired, but if someone tries to tell you, oh wait and see, it's out of context, ignore them. They're sticking their heads in the sand and willfully pretending the last several years of story didn't happen. We were told, wait and see, when the first inklings of Teldrassil were fed to us, and we said, this sucks, please don't. And yet, the writers have yet to earn back the level of trust that wait and see demands. They ruined one of my favourite characters against all reason, they constantly mishandled the Forsaken, and they served the Night Elves L after L after fucking L until they lost basically everything. Anyway. Shoutouts to my patrons who are all very handsome people, and thank you all for watching. Let me know your feelings down in the comments, please be kind to yourselves, and I will see you next time.